Miss Darmon's tiny hotel room had a window with a view of Broadway and its bustling theatres. But instead of gazing out, Lynette Darmond had turned her chair away. She was an actress who depended on Broadway for work, but Broadway didn't seem to care much about her anymore. She was staying at the Hotel Thalia, a popular spot where actors took a break during the summer and prepared to hunt for gigs in the fall when the smaller theatres reopened. Her room wasn't much, but it was packed with keepsakes from her theatre days, along with photos of her closest friends. As she sat there, she focused on one picture and smiled. "Wonder what Lee's up to these days," she muttered to herself. The photo she was looking at was of Rosalie Ray, a stunning young woman. In it, Rosalie was rocking a short skirt and perched on a swing. Every night in the theatre, Rosalie would swing high above the crowd, soaring over the audience's heads. And that's when the real show began. Whenever Rosalie's long, gorgeous legs were up in the air, her yellow garter would somehow slip off and tumble down to the audience. The men went wild every single night. They'd leap out of their seats, arms reaching up, desperate to catch it. Sure, she could sing and dance too, but let's be real, when that swing came out, the crowd couldn't care less about anything else. Rosalie didn't have to work too hard to land theatre gigs. Then, out of nowhere, after 2 years of swinging and stealing the show, Rosalie quit the theatre. She packed up and moved to the countryside, leaving everyone wondering why. Exactly 17 minutes after Lynette had said, "Wonder what Lee's up to these days," there was a knock at her door. It was, of course, Rosalie Ray. "Come in," Lynette called out, and in walked Rosalie. Yep, it was her old friend. She took off her hat, and Lynette immediately noticed how tired and worn out she looked. Something was clearly wrong. "I've got the room right above yours," Rosalie said, walking in. "The folks at the front desk mentioned you were here." "I've been here since late April," Lynette replied. "I'm starting work again next week, out in some small town." "But you left the theatre 3 months ago, Lee. What brings you here?" Rosalie sighed. "I'll tell you, Lynn, but I need a drink first." Lynette handed her a bottle. Rosalie took a long sip and let out a satisfied sigh. "Ah, that's the stuff. First drink I've had in 3 months. So yeah, I quit the theatre. I was over it, the whole scene, really. And especially the men. You know what it's like, Lynn? We're always fending them off. They're relentless. They think a couple of drinks or a fancy dinner gives them the right to act however they want. It's exhausting. And for what? We bust our butts, barely make any money, and hold out hope that one day we'll finally make it big. But for me, the men were the worst part." She paused for another drink, then continued. "Anyway, I saved up $200, and when summer rolled around, I left it all behind. Found myself a little village by the sea out on Long Island. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a peaceful summer where I could recharge and maybe even work on my acting skills. But then, well, there was someone else staying in the same house. The Reverend Arthur Lyle, yep, a preacher. The moment I saw him, I was smitten. He was the kind of man you don't come across every day, kind, handsome, and oh, that voice of his. It was like velvet." She leaned back, her voice softening. "A month later, we decided to get married. Can you believe it? Me, settling down. We were going to live in this cute little house near the church, surrounded by flowers and maybe even a few animals. It felt like a dream. And no, I didn't tell him about my past as an actress. I didn't want to. That life, it was behind me. I wanted to forget it ever happened. I was so happy, Lynn. I started going to church, helped out the ladies in the village, went on long walks with Arthur. It was perfect. That little village felt like the best place on earth, and I thought I'd stay there forever. But then, Rosalie hesitated, her tone shifting. One morning, the old woman who worked in the house started talking about Arthur. She adored him too. She said he was wonderful, but she also mentioned something odd. Apparently he'd been in love before, and it didn't end well. She said he kept some kind of memento from that relationship locked away in his desk. Sometimes she'd catch him taking it out and looking at it. She didn't know what it was, though. His desk was always locked. Rosalie looked down, her voice quiet. That afternoon I couldn't help myself. I asked him about it. Ida, he said. Yeah, I was using my real name back then. This all happened before I even knew you, and I never actually met her. It was a completely different kind of love than what I feel for you. Was she beautiful? I asked, curious. She was very beautiful, Arthur replied. Did you see her a lot? About 10 times, he said casually. And this memento, did she send it to you? It came from her, he said with this soft, almost dreamy tone. Why didn't you ever meet her? I asked, starting to feel a little uneasy. She was way out of my league, he admitted. Then he looked at me and added, But Ida, it's all in the past. It's finished. You're not upset, are you? Upset? No way. I love you even more now. And Lynn, I really meant it. Can you believe that? I thought it was the most beautiful, pure kind of love. He didn't even know her, never spoke to her. Yet he cared for her so deeply and didn't expect anything in return. I was convinced Arthur wasn't like all the other men. He was special, one of the good ones. But then, later that afternoon, around 4, Arthur had to step out for a while. His room door was open and I noticed his desk wasn't locked. My curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't resist. I had to see this memento for myself. So I walked in, opened the desk, found the box and carefully lifted the lid. Lynn, the second I saw what was inside, my heart dropped. I went straight to my room, packed my suitcase and left. Turns out, my wonderful Arthur, this man I thought was so different, wasn't any better than the rest of them. But Lee, what was in the box? Miss Darmond asked, leaning forward. Rosalie threw her hands up dramatically. One of my yellow garters, she exclaimed.